Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something a little different. We're not just telling one story, but two. We're going to trace the parallel lives of two titans, two men who started at the top and somehow climbed even higher, defining the very landscape of African business. Picture this for a moment, that low, quiet hum in your room right now. For so many, that hum is drowned out by the anxiety of money. But imagine a different world, one of immense wealth and power, where the challenges are not about survival, but about legacy and domination. Tonight's story is about two men who mastered that world, but in starkly different ways. This might be the most fascinating and most instructive bedtime story you'll ever hear about the different paths to building an empire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how spread out our little community is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the post-independence Nigeria of the late 1950s and early 1960s, two boys were born into worlds of immense privilege, yet their environments would shape them into fundamentally different kinds of businessmen. To say they were born with a silver spoon would be an understatement. It was more like they were born with a full, 12-piece, silver-plated cutlery set, complete with dessert forks. The question was, what would they do with it? In the South, in Lagos State, a young Femi Otedola grew up in a world of public service and disciplined order. His father, Sir Michael Otedola, was a respected politician who would become state governor. The atmosphere in the Otedola home was one of structure, protocol, and the immense importance of a good public reputation. Femi learned about systems and the machinery of government. He absorbed the lesson that success was tied to a well-ordered process and a name that commanded respect. Hundreds of miles north, in the ancient city of Kano, another boy, Aliko Dangote, was born into a different kind of dynasty. His was a world of private commerce, of merchants and trade. His great-grandfather, Alhassan Dantada, had been the wealthiest man in West Africa, a legendary figure who dominated the trade in kola nuts and ground nuts. While Otedola was observing a politician, Dangote was breathing in the air of raw capitalism. He was surrounded by the constant hum of deals being made, of commodities being moved, of profit and loss being calculated, not in government ledgers, but in the fast-paced world of the market. His childhood landscape wasn't defined by political offices, but by the famous Kano groundnut pyramids, colossal man-made mountains of peanut sacks that were a powerful symbol of northern Nigeria's commercial might. Sociologists still debate the extent to which social capital, the networks and relationships from one's upbringing, is a greater predictor of success than financial capital. These two boys had both. But the nature of their social capital was different. Otedola's was rooted in the political establishment of the South. Dangote's was rooted in the powerful merchant networks of the North. One boy was learning the importance of punctuality and protocol from a governor. The other was learning the art of the deal from traders who could probably calculate profit margins in their sleep. It was like two different Ivy League business schools, just with much better jollof rice. The economic environment of post-independence Nigeria was dominated by these two pillars: a powerful, oil-rich public sector and a deeply entrenched class of private merchant families. Otedola and Dangote were, in essence, the chosen sons of these two respective worlds. Their earliest entrepreneurial stirrings reflected their environments perfectly. A young Otedola, as we know, saw a need and created a service, invoicing his father for a manicure. It was a structured, formal approach to commerce. The young Dangote's first venture was simpler, more direct. He would buy cartons of sweets and sell them to his schoolmates for a profit. He was learning the fundamental rhythm of his family's business: buy low, sell high, and keep the velocity of money moving. Both showed early promise, though Dangote's business model was arguably more scalable from the get-go. For Otedola, the key lesson was order. He saw how his father's disciplined life created a foundation for influence and respect. He internalized the idea that the right process would lead to the right outcome. This would become the central, painful, and ultimately redeeming theme of his entire career. For Dangote, the key lesson was opportunity. He heard the stories of his great-grandfather and saw firsthand how immense fortunes could be built by identifying a need in the market and fulfilling it at scale. He learned that capital, when put to work relentlessly, could grow into an unstoppable force. This would become the engine of his entire life's work. Two boys, both fortunate, both destined for greatness. One would become a master of the deal, the trade, the corporate maneuver. The other would become a master of production, of industry, of building things from the ground up. One's journey would be a volatile ride of dizzying peaks and terrifying valleys. The other's would be a methodical, relentless, seemingly unstoppable climb. They were setting out from two different starting blocks, on two very different tracks, in a race to the summit of the African business world. They were setting out from two different starting blocks, on two very different tracks, in a race to the summit of the African business world. Their first major ventures out of the nest of their family influence would reveal the core of their business DNA and set the tone for the decades to come. Femi Otedola, armed with the theoretical knowledge of structure and discipline, stepped into the messy, practical world of commerce. He chose a familiar industry, printing, and set up his own small marketing and services company. It was here that he collided with the brutal realities of the real world. His days became a frantic dance of managing unreliable machines, sourcing materials, and most painfully, chasing clients for payment. He quickly discovered the soul-crushing difference between an invoice and actual money in the bank. This venture was not a runaway success. In fact, it was a grueling, frustrating, and barely profitable struggle. It was his real-world MBA, a masterclass in what can go wrong, with the tuition paid in sleepless nights and gut-wrenching anxiety. While Otedola was learning the hard way that profit margins can smell like industrial solvent, a different story was unfolding in the north. At the age of 21, Aliko Dangote approached his uncle, the powerful commodity trader Sanusi Dantata, and asked for a loan to start his own business. He wasn't starting small. He received a significant sum, which he immediately used to begin trading cement, sugar, and rice at scale. He was not learning through trial and error. He was executing a playbook that had been perfected by his family for generations. His business was profitable from day one. His success was less of a learning curve and more of a vertical rocket launch, powered by family connections, a deep-seated understanding of his market, and an almost supernatural genius for trade. He was a fish returned to water. Economists still debate whether early-stage entrepreneurial success is driven more by innovation or by superior execution within an existing market. In these first ventures, Otedola and Dangote provided a perfect case study for both sides of the argument. Otedola was trying to create a professional service, an innovation in a small-scale industry, but he struggled with the execution. Dangote, on the other hand, did not invent a new product. He entered the age-old market of commodity trading and simply out-executed everyone else. He was faster, more efficient, and more relentless. Their journeys were also shaped by the unique economic climate of the time. The indigenization decree of 1972 had compelled foreign-owned companies to sell majority stakes to Nigerians, creating a massive opportunity for local entrepreneurs with access to capital to enter and dominate new sectors. For a young man like Dangote with a significant loan and an impeccable family name, the wind was at his back. The system was primed for a well-capitalized Nigerian to build a large-scale enterprise. The nature of their starting capital also tells a crucial story. Otedola was essentially bootstrapping, fighting for every naira. Dangote's loan from his uncle was more than just money. It was a vote of confidence, a transfer of credibility within a close-knit merchant community. It was a formal version of an ancient trust-based system of moving money and credit, like the Hawala networks that had powered trade in the region for centuries. It was business built on reputation, a concept Otedola was learning in theory, while Dangote was leveraging it in practice. These first ventures were the crucibles that forged their core business instincts. Otedola's frustrating experience in printing sharpened his focus on logistics, cash flow, and solving systemic problems. He was learning to become a diagnostician of business, identifying the pain points in a system. The failure to turn a significant profit taught him a lesson in financial discipline that would later save his life. Dangote's immediate success, meanwhile, reinforced his instinct for scale. He learned that in the game of commodities, volume is king. He developed a reputation for being a reliable, high-volume trader who always delivered. He mastered the art of turning over his capital quickly, making a small margin on huge quantities again and again. He was learning to become a master of the supply chain, a conduit through which the basic building blocks of the nation's economy would flow. One man was learning through failure, the other through success. One was being taught the harsh lessons of operational reality, the other the powerful principles of scale and market dominance. These were just the opening moves in their long and complex careers, the training grounds for the much larger battles to come. Both were about to find the single, grand idea that would transform them from successful young businessmen into the titans they were destined to become. One man was learning through failure, the other through success. Both had now graduated from the brutal, instructive kindergarten of early-stage business. They were ready for the main event. They were about to find the single grand idea that would transform them from successful young businessmen into the titans they were destined to become. And it was in this pivotal moment that their paths, born from different worlds, would diverge dramatically. Femi Otedola, shaped by his struggles with the printing press, had become a diagnostician of systemic pain. He looked at the chaos of Lagos and saw not just problems but inefficiencies. His grand vision was born from a sound, the daily deafening roar of 1,000,000 diesel generators kicking into life. He realized the colossal failure of the national power grid had created a secondary, informal economy. His genius was in seeing that the real market gap wasn't just in the need for diesel, but in the chaotic, unreliable, and unprofessional process of getting it. His grand vision, therefore, was not to sell a product, but to perfect a service. He would create a world-class logistics machine, Xenon Petroleum, to bring order to this chaos, selling peace of mind to a corporate world desperate for it. He was a service innovator. Aliko Dangote, meanwhile, was looking at the Nigerian economy from a different angle. As a master trader, he was making a fortune importing commodities like cement, sugar, and salt. But he saw a fundamental vulnerability in his own success. He was entirely at the mercy of international price fluctuations, currency devaluations, and the notoriously unpredictable logistics of Nigerian ports. He would have been painfully familiar with the concept of demurrage, the costly fees paid when a chartered ship is delayed in port, a constant headache for importers. He realized that true, lasting wealth and national power came not from trading things, but from making them. His grand vision was a pivot from commerce to industry. It was a strategy of backward integration. Instead of importing cement, he would build the largest cement factory in the country. Instead of importing sugar, he would build the refineries. He was an industrial revolutionary. Otedola's big idea was to solve a massive headache for corporate Nigeria. Dangote's big idea was to build the factory that made the aspirin. Both were incredibly lucrative paths, but one required a lot more concrete. This divergence in their visions placed them on opposite sides of a classic economic debate. Development economists still debate whether a nation's growth is best spurred by a vibrant service sector or a strong manufacturing base. Without knowing it, Otedola and Dangote had become the two primary apostles for these competing gospels of development. Otedola was betting on services, logistics, and trade, the fast-moving, high-velocity world of a modern service economy. Dangote was betting on manufacturing, production, and industrial might, the solid foundational bedrock of a self-sufficient nation. The political winds of the era favored Dangote's vision. Nigeria's Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, in the late 1980s, for all its controversy, actively promoted policies aimed at boosting local manufacturing and reducing the nation's crippling dependency on imports. For an industrialist with a vision like Dangote's, the government was essentially creating a runway for his ambitions to take flight. Both men looked at Nigeria's reliance on imports and saw an opportunity. Otedola saw a chance to be a better, faster importer. Dangote saw a chance to make importing unnecessary. It was the difference between wanting to win the race and wanting to build a whole new car. Otedola became obsessed with the movement of things, trucks, ships, fuel. Dangote became obsessed with the making of things, cement, sugar, salt. One was playing a high-stakes game of Tetris with the national supply chain. The other was busy building the blocks themselves. Otedola's vision required mastering the volatile world of international commodity trading and local distribution. Dangote's vision required the immense capital risk of building factories, a long-term illiquid investment in the nation's future. These were the grand visions that would define their empires. One man looked at a problem and saw a system to be perfected. The other looked at a product and saw a factory to be built. One would become the king of distribution, the other the king of production. Both were aiming for the same summit of the African business world, but they were now setting out to climb two entirely different faces of the same mountain, armed with two different sets of tools and two profoundly different maps for the journey ahead. A grand vision, whether for a logistical machine or a manufacturing empire, is worthless without fuel. The fuel of business is capital, and the way a founder chooses to fund their dream determines the very nature of their journey. For Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, their financial blueprints were as starkly different as their foundational visions, revealing two opposing philosophies on how to build an empire. Femi Otedola, the master of the service-based solution, chose the path of speed and leverage. To build Xenon Petroleum at the breakneck pace he envisioned, he turned to the banks. He became a master of using OPM, other people's money. His strategy was to use his powerful business plan and his sterling family name to secure massive lines of credit. He saw debt not as a burden, but as a tool, a high-octane fuel that could propel his company to market dominance faster than any of his competitors. Otedola's approach was like using a rocket pack, incredibly fast, exhilarating, and prone to explosive failure. He was a financial architect, building a towering structure not with his own bricks, but with materials loaned to him by others. This allowed for a speed and scale that was breathtaking, but it also created a structure that was ultimately beholden to its creditors. Aliko Dangote, the budding industrialist, chose the opposite path, the slow, methodical, and immensely solid route of reinvestment. After his initial loan from his uncle, which he famously repaid in record time, Dangote adopted a simple, powerful financial mantra: take the profits from the business and pour them right back in. The money he made trading sugar one year would become the foundation for a small pasta factory the next. The profits from both would then be plowed into building his first cement plant. His approach was more like building a staircase out of solid granite, slower, more tiring, but much less likely to unexpectedly send you into a tailspin. He was building his empire with his own bricks, ensuring that the foundation was solid before adding the next floor. This placed the two men on opposite ends of a foundational question in business. Corporate finance theorists still debate the concept of optimal capital structure, the perfect mix of debt and equity a company should have. Otedola, in his Zenon days, represented the aggressive, debt-heavy model. Dangote, in contrast, was a real-world disciple of the pecking order theory, which states that companies prefer to finance themselves first with their own profits, then with debt, and only as a last resort, by selling ownership stakes. Dangote's entire empire was a testament to this theory, built floor by floor with the cash generated by the business itself. For Otedola, bankers were essential partners in his high-speed ascent. For Dangote, bankers were people you were polite to at parties, but you'd rather not have them holding the blueprints to your house. This aversion to debt and leverage is a far cry from the abstract world of modern finance, but it has ancient roots. For centuries, debt was recorded on things like the tally stick, a notched piece of wood that was split in two, with both creditor and debtor holding a matching half. It was a tangible physical representation of a financial obligation. Dangote's approach was philosophically closer to this old world of tangible assets and earned capital, while Otedola was a master of the modern, abstract world of financial leverage. Otedola saw money as a tool to be leveraged, a key to unlock other people's vaults to build his vision faster. Dangote saw money as a seed to be planted, something to be nurtured and grown into a giant, money-producing tree, or in his case, a cement factory. These two different financial philosophies had profound consequences. Otedola's high-leverage model created a magnificent but fragile empire, one that was incredibly vulnerable to external shocks in the financial system. Dangote's reinvestment model created an industrial fortress. It grew more slowly, but it was incredibly resilient, able to withstand market downturns and political instability because it was not beholden to the whims of creditors. One was building with borrowed speed, the other with earned solidity. These early financial choices, made in the formative years of their empires, were not just matters of strategy but reflections of their core personalities. They would profoundly shape their destinies, their ability to weather the inevitable storms ahead, and their fundamental relationship with the concept of risk itself. Those early financial choices, one of borrowed speed and the other of earned solidity, were not just strategic decisions. They were the first clear expressions of their fundamentally different philosophies on risk. Every great fortune is built on a mountain of risk, but Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote chose to climb two very different kinds of mountains, facing entirely different dangers along the way. Femi Otedola, in his first act with Zenon Petroleum, was the consummate trader. He embraced a world of high-stakes financial risk. His entire empire was, in essence, a massive leveraged bet on the price of a single notoriously volatile commodity, oil. Otedola treated risk like a shot of espresso, a necessary jolt to get things moving fast. His genius was in market timing, in navigating the fast-moving currents of global supply and demand. This is the mindset of a trader. You accept the inherent volatility of the market and bet that you are smarter and faster than everyone else. It's a path to astonishingly rapid wealth, but one that is constantly exposed to storms beyond your control. In a way, his venture was a modern, sophisticated version of the kind of speculative mania seen throughout history, like the infamous South Sea bubble of 1720, where an entire nation got swept up in a speculative frenzy that ultimately collapsed. Otedola was playing a high-stakes game of poker with the global markets. Aliko Dangote, by contrast, was the consummate industrialist. He treated risk like a slow-cooked stew, something to be managed carefully over a long period. The risks he took were not about daily price swings, but about long, slow, and arduous execution. When he decided to build a cement factory, he was making a bet that he could manage a decade-long project, navigate the labyrinth of government bureaucracy, build a complex piece of infrastructure in a challenging environment, and that the Nigerian economy would be strong enough to buy his product at the end of it all. This was not financial risk in the same way, it was operational and political risk. Dangote's biggest daily fear wasn't a sudden crash in a global price index. It was a sudden crash of a cement truck into a pothole the size of a swimming pool. Both were stressful, but one was slightly more within his control. He was playing a long, slow, methodical game of chess against the logistical challenges of an entire continent. In the language of finance, their approaches can be understood through the lens of systematic versus unsystematic risk. Systematic risk is the risk inherent to the entire market, a global recession, for example, which is impossible to avoid. Otedola's leveraged model was massively exposed to this. Unsystematic risk is specific to a company or industry, a factory breakdown or a supply chain problem. Dangote's entire strategy of backward integration and diversification across different commodities was a masterclass in minimizing this kind of company-specific risk. He sought to control his own destiny by building a fortress that could, he hoped, withstand the storms of the outside world. Their different approaches likely stemmed from their psychological makeup. Behavioral economists still debate the risk as feelings hypothesis, which suggests that emotional responses to risky situations often diverge from rational, cognitive assessments of that same risk. Otedola seemed to possess the emotional disposition for the trader's life, a comfort with high volatility and rapid change. Dangote, on the other hand, displayed the deep well of patience and methodical calm of the industrial builder, a man willing to wait years, even decades, for his bets to pay off. Ultimately, Dangote's entire industrial strategy was a massive de-risking effort. By making his own products, he was insulating himself from the very market volatility that Otedola was riding. He was trading the unpredictable risk of the global market for the manageable, though immense, risk of local execution. He was choosing the devil he knew over the devil he didn't. They were not just different businessmen, they were different species of risk-taker. One was a master of the volatile market, the other a master of the complex operation. This fundamental difference in their approach to risk, their comfort with different kinds of uncertainty, would be the single most important factor in explaining their dramatically different journeys when a true global crisis finally arrived. And it would shape the very way they presented their companies and themselves to the world. A man's philosophy on risk, his comfort with either the trader's volatility or the builder's long grind, inevitably shapes how he presents his work and himself to the world. For Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, their different relationships with risk led to two fundamentally different approaches to building their most public-facing asset, their brand. Femi Otedola, the master of the corporate maneuver, built corporate brands. He created names like Xenon and later Forte Oil. These names were abstract, sophisticated, and modern. They were designed to sound professional, reliable, and global. The brand was the sleek logo on the side of a massive tanker truck or a pristine filling station. It was a business-to-business brand designed to communicate competence and efficiency to other corporations. Otedola created cool, abstract company names that sounded like a futuristic tech firm. This was a deliberate choice. He was building an institutional identity that was separate from his own. The brand was the promise, and he was the man who stood behind it, ensuring it delivered. Aliko Dangote, the master industrialist, took the opposite approach. His branding strategy was profoundly simple. My name is Dangote, and this is my cement. He put his own family name on everything. Dangote sugar, Dangote salt, Dangote cement. His name, not a corporate invention, became the brand. This was a business-to-consumer strategy at its most direct. He was not just building a company, he was building a household name, a name he wanted synonymous with the essential building blocks of Nigerian life. You would see the Xenon brand thundering down the highway on a tanker. You would see the Dangote brand on the bag of sugar your grandmother used to bake a cake. Both were powerful, but one felt a lot more personal at tea time. This divergence placed them at the heart of a classic marketing debate. Marketing experts still debate the long-term viability of a personal brand versus a corporate brand, weighing the power of an individual's charisma against the stability of an institutional identity. Otedola was building a corporate brand that could, in theory, outlive him or be sold. Dangote was building a personal dynasty where the man and the enterprise were inextricably linked. It meant that if a Zenon truck was late, the company had a problem. If a bag of Dangote sugar was bad, Aliko Dangote himself had a problem. In a way, Dangote's approach was a modern continuation of an ancient practice. For centuries, craftsmen and guilds used hallmarks or trademarks to certify the origin and quality of their work. A silversmith would stamp his unique mark onto a piece, personally guaranteeing its authenticity and quality. By putting his name on every product, Dangote was doing the same on an industrial scale. He was personally vouching for the quality of the most basic goods that millions of people used every day. Both men were masters at building brand equity, the immense intangible value that comes from public perception. Otedola built the equity of a trusted, premium service provider. You went to Zenon for reliable fuel delivery, a promise of professionalism. Dangote built the equity of a foundational provider. You bought Dangote because it was the standard, the national champion, the product that built the country. This difference in branding philosophy reflected their core business models. Otedola, the trader and logistics expert, was selling a sophisticated solution to other businesses. He needed a brand that spoke the language of the boardroom. Dangote, the industrialist, was selling essential products to an entire nation. He needed a brand that spoke the language of the kitchen, the construction site, and the corner store. He was building a relationship not just with corporate procurement officers, but with 100 million Nigerians. Otedola was the man behind the brand. Dangote was the brand. These identities, so carefully constructed, would become crucial tools. They were the public faces of their empires, the symbols of their power and promise. And these powerful brands would be their primary weapons as they navigated the most complex and high-stakes arena of all, the intricate dance between business and political power. Their powerful brands were the public faces of their empires, the symbols of their promise to the world. But in the high-stakes environment of Nigerian big business, a great brand and a great product are not always enough. To build an empire on the scale that Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote envisioned, they had to master another, far more complex and delicate art, the intricate dance between business and political power. In Nigeria, business and politics are not distant cousins, they are conjoined twins. To succeed, one must be as skilled in the corridors of power as in the corporate boardroom. Both men were grandmasters in this game of political chess, but they played with distinctly different styles. Otedola, the son of a governor, was a natural. He grew up speaking the language of politics and understood its rhythms instinctively. His approach was often that of a relationship builder, a master of soft power. He excelled at networking, at building personal connections with key figures, and at making a persuasive case for policies that aligned with his business interests. His masterstroke in convincing the government to deregulate the diesel market, which created the very opportunity for Zenon's existence, was a testament to this skill. He was a charismatic player who could charm the queen off the board. Aliko Dangote's style was less about personal charisma and more about strategic alignment. He was the master nation builder. His approach was to make his own business goals inextricably linked with Nigeria's national development goals. His pitch to every successive government was simple and devastatingly effective. What is good for the Dangote Group is good for Nigeria. He was not just building factories, he was creating jobs, ending import dependency, and forging a path to national self-sufficiency. Otedola's pitch was often, "If you create the right market, I will build a world-class business." Dangote's pitch was, "I am building a world-class Nigeria, so you should probably create the right market for me." He made himself and his industrial empire indispensable to the nation's economic agenda. Their activities walked a fine line that has long been a subject of academic debate. Political scientists still debate the line between policy entrepreneurship, where business leaders help shape beneficial public policy, and rent-seeking, where they simply lobby for special favors to enrich themselves. Were Otedola and Dangote brilliant policy entrepreneurs who helped modernize their sectors, or were they shrewd rent-seekers who secured favorable conditions? The truth, as is often the case, is a complex mixture of both. They operated in an environment that demanded this kind of engagement. The economic model of Nigeria and many other emerging economies is often described as a form of state capitalism, where the government plays a significant and directive role in the market. In such a system, close, collaborative relationships between the state and major private enterprises are not an anomaly. They are a necessity. Success depends on understanding and influencing government policy. The history of Nigeria is filled with examples of powerful, informal networks of influence that have shaped both business and politics, like the famous Kaduna Mafia of the 1970s. Navigating these complex webs of power was a required skill for survival and growth. Otedola sought policies that favored his market, like deregulation, which fostered open competition that he knew he could win. Dangote, on the other hand, often sought policies that protected his industry, like tariffs or import restrictions that would give his local manufacturing plants a crucial advantage over foreign competition. One sought an open field to play on. The other sought to have the field tilted to his advantage to achieve a national goal. Both men understood a fundamental truth of their environment. To build an empire of their scale, they had to be brilliant political strategists. Their ability to secure the right licenses, to understand policy shifts before they happened, and to ensure the government saw them as partners, not adversaries, was a crucial and powerful weapon in their arsenal. It was this political savvy that cleared the path for them to wage their commercial battles and build their dominance, block by block, deal by deal. With their political pathways secured, Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote turned their full attention to the commercial battlefield. They were both aiming for total market dominance, but their strategies of conquest were as different as their foundational visions. One was a market disruptor, the other an industrial conqueror. Femi Otedola's path to dominance was a masterclass in market disruption. He entered the chaotic, fragmented diesel market and fundamentally changed the rules of the game. His competitive style was like a rapier, fast, precise, and aimed directly at his opponent's weakest points. He launched a devastating two-pronged attack. First, he initiated a ruthless price war. Having secured his own supply chain through direct importation, his cost per liter was far lower than his rivals. He used this advantage to slash prices, making it impossible for smaller, less efficient operators to compete without losing money on every sale. Second, at the very same time he was the cheapest option, he also became the best. He offered a level of professionalism and reliability the market had never seen. His trucks were clean, his drivers were professional, and his schedules were dependable. Competitors who tried to match his price couldn't possibly match his quality, and those who had good quality couldn't come close to his price. He had created an impossible choice for his rivals and an irresistible one for his customers. Aliko Dangote's strategy was not to disrupt a market, but to conquer it with overwhelming industrial force. His competitive style was less like a rapier and more like a giant sledgehammer. It wasn't subtle, but after a few swings, there wasn't much of an opponent left. His primary weapon was economies of scale in manufacturing. He didn't just build a factory, he built the biggest, most technologically advanced, and most efficient factory. This allowed him to produce goods like cement at a per-unit cost that no one else, neither local competitors nor foreign importers, could possibly match. He would then use this cost advantage to flood the market with his product, effectively suffocating the competition. Otedola wanted to be the biggest and best fish in the pond. Dangote's goal was simpler. He wanted to own the pond, the water, and the fishing rights, and then build a factory to make more ponds. Their approaches are a perfect illustration of a key business debate. Business strategists still debate whether it is more effective to pursue a blue ocean strategy, creating uncontested market space, or a red ocean strategy, competing in existing industries. Otedola, in a sense, created a blue ocean of professional fuel logistics within the bloody red ocean of commodity trading. Dangote charged directly into the reddest of oceans, commodities, and bled his competitors dry until he was the only predator left. Both men were masters of building a competitive moat, a concept analyzed in Michael Porter's famous 5 Forces framework. Otedola exploited the rivalry among existing competitors by introducing a superior model. Dangote, on the other hand, was a master of creating barriers to entry. By building such massive industrial plants, he made the price of entry for any potential new competitor so astronomically high that it was nearly impossible to challenge him. Their shared willingness to use aggressive pricing to seize market share was a key tactic. At times, their strategies resembled the use of a loss leader, where a product is sold at a razor-thin margin or even a small loss simply to drive competitors out of business, with the plan of raising prices later in a less competitive market. They were not playing to participate, they were playing to win decisively. The end result of these strategies was total market domination. Otedola's Xenon captured the lion's share of the corporate diesel market, becoming the undisputed king of distribution. Dangote's name became synonymous with his products, achieving a level of market control in cement and sugar that was practically monopolistic. One was a master of service, the other a master of scale. Though their methods were different, one a fencer and the other a brawler, both were brilliant and ruthless competitors who understood a fundamental truth. In the world of high-stakes business, market share is not given, it is taken. They had both reached the summit of their respective industries. But the true test of a titan is not just how they win, but how they face their greatest crisis. They had both reached the summit of their respective industries, masters of their commercial domains. But the true test of a titan is not measured at the peak. It is measured in the valley, in the heart of the storm. Every great business career is defined by its greatest crisis. And for Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, these trials by fire were as profoundly different as the empires they had built. Femi Otedola's crisis was a single, acute, and spectacular event. It was a financial inferno. The 2008 global financial crisis was what the writer Nassim Nicholas Taleb would call a black swan, a rare, unpredictable event with massive, world-changing consequences. For Otedola, whose Xenon empire was built on the twin pillars of high oil prices and abundant credit, this black swan was not just a distant threat, it was an extinction-level event. The collapse of the market was swift, brutal, and total. It was an external shockwave that his high-leverage business model was uniquely vulnerable to. In a matter of months, his entire billion-dollar net worth was wiped out and replaced by a billion-dollar debt. Otedola's crisis was like a sudden, spectacular shark attack. It was violent, public, and very nearly fatal. Aliko Dangote's crisis has been a different beast altogether. He has never had a single cataclysmic Lehman Brothers moment. Instead, his trial by fire has been a chronic 40-year war of attrition against the systemic challenges of his environment. His crisis is not a single event, but a daily grinding reality. It is the legendary Lagos traffic jam, the go-slow that can turn a 2-hour journey into a 10-hour nightmare, threatening his entire supply chain. It is the epileptic power supply that forces him to build his own power plants to run his factories. It is the inconsistent government policies, the currency fluctuations, the crumbling infrastructure. Dangote's crisis has been more like being slowly nibbled to death by a million piranhas for 4 decades. It's hard to say which is worse, but one is definitely more cinematic. This contrast between them is a perfect illustration of a core business debate. Organizational theorists still debate whether businesses are more vulnerable to sudden catastrophic shocks or to the slow erosion of organizational drift and chronic environmental challenges. Otedola's empire was felled by a shock. Dangote's genius has been in his ability to build an empire that can withstand the constant grinding pressure of a chronically difficult environment. In 2008, Otedola was kept up at night by the ghost of Lehman Brothers and a collapsing global economy. On any given day, Dangote is kept up at night by the ghost of a pothole on the road to Benin City that just swallowed a truck full of cement. The nature of their enemies was different. Otedola's was an abstract global financial force. Dangote's are the tangible daily frustrations of operational reality. These two different types of crises tested different aspects of their character and leadership. Otedola's trial by fire was a test of his ability to survive a total wipeout, to confront his ego, and to find the humility and strength to rebuild from absolute zero. It was a test of character in the face of public failure. It required a spectacular act of surrender and rebirth. Dangote's long trial, on the other hand, is a test of relentless, grinding persistence. It requires an almost inhuman level of patience, a genius for operational problem solving, and the deep-seated belief in a long-term vision that can withstand 1,000 daily frustrations. It's not about surviving one big explosion, but about the discipline to keep walking through a constantly burning forest. Otedola had to face a once-in-a-generation financial hurricane. Dangote has had to build a hurricane-proof house in a place where it drizzles acid every single day. One man's defining challenge was a sudden public inferno that required a dramatic escape. The other's has been a long, slow burn that has required a lifetime of endurance. The way each man was built to respond to his own unique trial by fire would reveal the true nature of his resilience and the core of his genius. The way a man responds to his unique trial by fire reveals the true nature of his resilience, the core of his genius. For Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, their vastly different crises forged two equally powerful yet starkly contrasting forms of resilience. One was the resilience of the phoenix, the other, the resilience of the fortress. Femi Otedola's resilience was a dramatic, transformative act of rebirth. Faced with total annihilation, his response was not to fight a battle he had already lost, but to engage in a strategic surrender. He let his old empire and the ego that came with it burn to the ground. This act of letting go, of dismantling his life's work to save his name, was an extraordinary display of emotional courage. His comeback was a perfect example of what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where a person experiences profound positive psychological change after a life crisis. He didn't just recover, he evolved. His new business philosophy, built on structure and integrity, was a direct result of his trauma. His story is like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer. The philosophy is that the piece is more beautiful and valuable for having been broken, its cracks a testament to its history. Otedola did not hide the cracks in his career. He rebuilt his reputation with them, turning his failure into a golden lesson in integrity. Aliko Dangote's resilience, on the other hand, has been a story of relentless, grinding persistence. he has never had a single dramatic comeback because he has never allowed himself to be knocked down completely. His is the resilience of a fortress, built of solid granite, designed to withstand a constant 40-year siege. When faced with a problem, his solution is not to adapt, but to conquer. When the public power grid proved unreliable, he built his own power plants. When the public ports became a bottleneck, he built his own port terminals. When faced with a wall, Otedola learned the humility to walk around it. Dangote's approach has always been to build a factory that makes wall-destroying machines and then sell those machines to everyone else. This constant battle against a sea of challenges raises a fascinating question. Biologists and psychologists still debate the stress inoculation theory, which questions whether exposure to manageable stressors builds resilience or simply wears an organism down over time. Dangote's entire career seems to be a powerful argument for the former. The constant exposure to Nigeria's operational challenges has not worn his organization down. It has made it into one of the most adaptable and battle-hardened industrial enterprises in the world. Otedola's resilience was like a superhero who has to die and be resurrected with new powers. Dangote's is more like a Terminator. It just keeps walking forward, ignoring bullets, explosions, and bad roads with the same determined expression. Otedola's comeback required him to become a master of letting go. Dangote's continued success requires him to be a master of holding on, of grinding out a victory day after day, year after year. One man's genius was revealed in a moment of profound, humble transformation. The other's has been revealed in a lifetime of stubborn, unyielding persistence. Otedola's resilience gave him a second act, a new and wiser chapter in his life. Dangote's resilience has given him a single, epic, 40-year first act that is still being written. While one story is a dramatic tale of rebirth and the other a chronicle of persistence, both demonstrate an extraordinary capacity to absorb punishment and continue moving forward. This shared trait of deep, unshakable resilience, though expressed in profoundly different ways, is perhaps the most crucial secret to their enduring success. And nowhere was this resilience more tested than in the complex, chaotic arena of the supply chain. The resilience of the phoenix and the resilience of the fortress were forged in their own unique crucibles, but both forms of strength were built upon a shared and perhaps surprising foundation of genius. Beneath the high-flying trader and the master industrialist lay a shared identity. They were both, at their very core, masters of logistics. In a complex and often chaotic environment like Nigeria, they understood that the person who can reliably and efficiently move things from point A to point B is king. Logistics is the unglamorous, blue-collar work of the business world. While other CEOs were giving speeches, Otedola and Dangote were likely awake at night worrying about truck axles and tide schedules. It's not sexy, but it's where their empires were truly built. Femi Otedola's genius was in mastering the art of distribution. His entire Xenon empire was a monument to logistical precision. His daily puzzle was a symphony of moving parts, orchestrating the arrival of massive oil tankers from Europe, managing their discharge into coastal depots, and then coordinating a fleet of thousands of trucks to deliver a time-sensitive product to the doorsteps of thousands of customers. He was a conductor, bringing order to a complex orchestra of ships, pipelines, and roads to deliver a promise of absolute reliability. Aliko Dangote's genius was in mastering the entire end-to-end supply chain from the ground to the consumer. His was a masterclass in vertical integration, the strategy of a company owning every step of its production process. He wasn't just coordinating the movement of goods, he was building the entire system from scratch. His daily logistical puzzle was exponentially more complex. How do I get this mountain of limestone from the quarry, transport it to my factory, turn it into cement, and then get that cement to every corner of the country without it getting stuck in the infamous Apapa gridlock for a week. To solve this, he didn't just buy trucks. He built his own port terminals and invested in his own power plants. Both men hated leaving things to chance. Otedola solved this by creating a delivery system you could set your watch to. Dangote solved it by buying the quarry, building the factory, and owning the trucks. It's the business equivalent of, if you want something done right, do it yourself, and also own all the component parts of the universe. Their approaches reflected two different schools of thought in supply chain management. Logistics experts still debate the merits of a lean, just-in-time supply chain versus a resilient, just-in-case supply chain with high inventory. Otedola's model for the fast-moving oil market had to be relatively lean and agile. Dangote, facing unpredictable roads and port delays, built a resilient, just-in-case model, with massive silos and warehouses to ensure he never ran out of raw materials or finished products. Otedola perfected the last mile of distribution, the critical link to the final customer. Dangote perfected the entire journey, from the raw earth to the final customer. One was the conductor of a brilliant orchestra. The other was the engineer who not only conducted the orchestra, but had first built every single one of the instruments from scratch. This shared obsession with logistics was born of necessity. To operate at scale in Nigeria is to be at war with chaos. It is a war against bad roads, congested ports, and unpredictable delays. Both men in their own ways won this war. They created predictability where there was none. They built private systems of order that were often more reliable than the public infrastructure they were forced to use. While their headline-grabbing achievements were in finance and industry, it was this quiet, operational genius that was the true engine of their success. They were both, at heart, men who understood the profound power of getting the right thing to the right place at the right time. And the vast, complex corporate structures they would eventually build were all designed to protect and enhance this core logistical machine. Their shared genius for logistics was the engine of their empires. But an engine, no matter how powerful, needs a chassis, a framework to house it and direct its power. This was the role of their corporate structures, the organizational blueprints they designed to manage their vast and complex enterprises. And just like their other philosophies, their approaches to building a company were a study in contrasts. One was a structure learned by fire, the other a structure built by design. Femi Otedola's journey as a corporate architect is a tale of two vastly different designs. His first creation, Xenon Petroleum, was a structure born of pure instinct. It was a classic hub-and-spoke model with him at the absolute center. Every major decision, every key relationship, every strategic bet flowed through him. This made the company incredibly fast and agile, able to react to market changes at the speed of his thought. But it was also its fatal flaw. The company had no independent immune system. It was entirely dependent on the health and judgment of its founder. It lacked the formal governance that could have provided a check on his own ambition and risk appetite. His second creation, Forte Oil, was the complete opposite. It was a structure born of painful experience. Having seen his first house burn down, he rebuilt the second one to be fireproof. He became a passionate convert to the gospel of corporate governance. He deliberately built a decentralized, process-driven institution. He installed a strong, independent board and empowered them to challenge him. Otedola, after his crash, learned to love the idea of a board of directors that could tell him he was wrong. He was building a company that could, in theory, survive and thrive without him. Aliko Dangote's approach has been far more consistent. He has spent 4 decades building and refining a single, massive structure, a conglomerate that combines the scale of a modern multinational with the centralized control of a family dynasty. The Dangote Group is a publicly traded entity. but his personal and family influence remains immense. His structure is designed for maximum control and the relentless execution of his singular, long-term vision. This model has modern parallels to the great zaibatsu of pre-war Japan, vast, family-controlled industrial conglomerates that dominated the national economy. Dangote's structure is built to run like a giant, unstoppable freight train, with him in the driver's seat, personally shoveling coal into the engine. This contrast puts them on opposite sides of a key business debate. Organizational behavior experts still debate whether a founder-led company culture is more innovative and agile than a professionally managed one, which may be more stable and scalable. Dangote is the ultimate example of the power of a founder-led vision. Otedola's journey with Forte Oil is a powerful argument for the stability of a professionally managed structure. Their models also represent two different answers to the classic agency theory, which studies the conflict between a company's management, the agent, and its owners, the principal. Otedola's reforms at Forte Oil were a textbook attempt to solve this problem by empowering an independent board to act as the true representatives of the shareholders. Dangote's model presents a different picture. As the dominant shareholder and visionary leader, the principal and the agent are, for all practical purposes, the same person, ensuring a singular alignment of vision and execution. He trusts the system as long as he is the one who designed it, owns it, and has the final say on every decision it makes. Otedola's new structure, learned by fire, was designed for resilience against the failure of one individual. Dangote's, built by design, was engineered for the flawless execution of one individual's grand vision. One was built to withstand shocks, the other to create them. These architectural choices, these blueprints for power, would ultimately shape not just how they ran their businesses, but their entire philosophy on the purpose of building them in the first place. The corporate structures they built were perfect reflections of their life experiences, blueprints for power designed for two different purposes. These purposes are most clearly revealed when a founder faces one of the most profound questions in business. Do you hold on forever, or do you sell? For Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, their answers to this question represent the ultimate divergence in their philosophies. Femi Otedola, having been forged and reforged in the fires of the market, ultimately revealed himself to be a master of the strategic exit. In 2019, with Forte Oil a resounding success, stable, profitable, and well-respected, he did something that baffled many. He sold his entire controlling stake. From a position of absolute strength, he chose to cash out at what he perceived to be the peak of the market. It was the final brilliant move of the master trader inside him. Having been forced to sell his first empire in a desperate fire sale, he now had the satisfaction of selling his second in a calm, calculated, and immensely profitable transaction. For Otedola, a business was a vehicle for creating value, and the final act of creation was to realize that value at the most opportune moment. Aliko Dangote's philosophy is the polar opposite. He is the ultimate long-term holder. The idea of selling a core part of his industrial empire, like Dangote Cement, is almost unthinkable. His life's work is not to create assets that can be sold, but to build enduring institutions that will form the industrial bedrock of Nigeria and Africa for generations to come. He isn't building a company to sell it, he is building a dynasty. For Otedola, selling a successful company at the right time was the final victory lap. For Dangote, selling one of his companies would be like selling one of his own limbs, unthinkable and probably quite messy. His ambition is to avoid the fate of families like the Vanderbilts in America, who built one of the world's greatest fortunes only to see it evaporate within a few generations. Their actions place them on opposite sides of a timeless investment debate. Investment theorists still debate the buy and hold strategy versus active trading, questioning whether it's more profitable to hold assets for the long term or to strategically time the market. Dangote is the world's foremost champion of the buy, build, and hold philosophy. Otedola, with his Forte oil exit, proved himself to be a masterful market timer. Their choices also provide a perfect illustration of what Harvard professor Noam Wasserman calls the founder's dilemma: the choice between being rich or being king. A founder who wants to remain king prioritizes maintaining control over their creation, often at the expense of its maximum financial value. A founder who chooses to be rich is willing to cede control or sell the company entirely to maximize their personal wealth. Dangote has always unequivocally chosen to be king. Otedola, having learned the brutal lessons of risk, made the calculated decision with Fort Oil to become rich, converting his control into massive liquid wealth. Dangote has always, unequivocally, chosen to be king. Otedola played the game of business like a master chess player, aiming for a brilliant checkmate. Dangote is playing like someone who wants to own the board, all the pieces, and the factory that makes the chess sets, forever. Otedola learned to see his companies as valuable assets. Dangote sees his companies as extensions of his own life's work. It's the difference between loving a beautiful house you've built and being the house itself. Ultimately, their views on selling provide the clearest window into their core motivations. Otedola, the trader, sees business as a brilliant high-stakes game to be won. The final validation of his skill is a perfectly timed, profitable exit. Dangote, the industrialist, sees business as a mission, a form of nation-building. The validation of his work is the continued growth and dominance of his companies, their smokestacks a permanent feature on the skyline. These profoundly different endgames would naturally lead them to think about their ultimate legacies in two very different ways. Their profoundly different endgames, one a master of the strategic exit, the other a master of the eternal hold, naturally led them to think about their ultimate legacies in two very different ways. For a titan who has built everything, the final question is no longer, what can I build for myself, but what can I build that will outlast me? For both Femi Otedola and Aliko Dangote, this question found its answer in philanthropy, and just as with everything else in their lives, they approached it with entirely different blueprints. Femi Otedola, having embraced the power of simplicity and the freedom of a liquid balance sheet, approached philanthropy as a strategic investor. His giving is often direct, personal, and headline-grabbing. He identifies a specific critical need, a children's hospital requiring a new wing, a university in need of funding, and makes a massive transformative capital injection. Otedola's approach to philanthropy is like a targeted lightning strike, a huge, brilliant flash of capital aimed at solving a specific problem decisively. It is the act of a man who understands the power of a single bold move, the same instinct that guided his business career. Aliko Dangote, the ultimate industrialist, approached philanthropy by doing what he does best. He built another institution. He established the Dangote Foundation, one of the largest private foundations on the African continent. His foundation operates like another arm of his business empire. It is a massive, professionally managed, long-term organization with a strategic mission to tackle systemic issues like malnutrition, health, and education. Dangote's approach is more like building a giant hydroelectric dam, a massive, long-term project designed to power an entire region for decades. He didn't just write a check, he built a whole new company whose only product is good deeds. One imagines the Dangote Foundation has quarterly targets and very serious board meetings. Their actions reflect a core debate in the world of giving. Nonprofit management experts still debate the effectiveness of unrestricted giving versus programmatic funding, questioning whether donors or the recipient organizations are better equipped to direct how funds are spent. Otedola's targeted donations are a form of programmatic funding on a grand scale. Dangote took it a step further, creating an entire programmatic entity to execute his vision. Both men are modern inheritors of a tradition of large-scale giving, articulated by figures like the 19th century industrialist Andrew Carnegie. In his famous essay, The Gospel of Wealth, Carnegie argued that the rich have a moral obligation to use their fortunes to advance social progress. Otedola and Dangote are providing two different modern answers to Carnegie's call. They are also practicing a form of venture philanthropy, applying business principles to their giving. They are not interested in charity that just alleviates symptoms. They are interested in strategic investments that create a measurable and scalable social return. The differences in their philanthropic styles are a perfect mirror of their business personalities. Otedola, the agile trader and investor, acts as a high-impact individual donor, able to move quickly and decisively. Dangote, the methodical industrial builder, constructs a large, permanent institution designed to operate for a century. One signs his name on hospital wings, the other builds a foundation so large it will likely have its own postcode. Both are effective ways of ensuring one is remembered fondly, especially by the people who write the history books. In this final chapter of their careers, they have entered a new kind of competition. The race is no longer for market share or net worth, but for impact and legacy. They are deploying their vast resources to shape the future of the nation and the continent they helped build. While their methods of giving away money are as different as their methods of making it, the goal has become strikingly similar: to convert the immense financial capital they accumulated into lasting human capital for generations to come. In this final chapter of their careers, they have entered a new kind of competition, a race for legacy and impact. Looking back, we see two men who started from a place of privilege and reached the same summit of unimaginable wealth and influence, yet they took two profoundly different paths to get there. One was the path of the trader, the other the industrialist. The philosopher Isaiah Berlin, in a famous essay, divided thinkers into two categories: the fox, who knows many things, and the hedgehog, who knows one big thing. Femi Otedola is the fox. He is agile, adaptable, and has mastered many different games: the high-stakes trade of commodities, the intricate art of corporate governance, and the brilliant timing of the strategic exit. His journey is a testament to the power of resilience, the supreme value of integrity, and the ultimate wisdom of finding peace in simplicity. He teaches that failure is not final, and that a good name is the only asset that truly endures. Aliko Dangote is the hedgehog. He knows one big thing: that the path to wealth and national prosperity is through industrialization. For 40 years, his entire focus, his entire being, has been dedicated to this single unifying vision. His journey is a testament to the power of a single-minded, long-term focus, the virtue of relentless persistence, and the idea of business as a form of nation-building. He teaches that great empires are not built in sprints, but over a lifetime of methodical, unwavering effort. If Otedola and Dangote were chefs, Otedola would be the brilliant experimental chef who masters French cuisine, then Japanese, and finally opens a perfect, simple sandwich shop. Dangote would be the chef who decided to make the world's best pizza, and 40 years later, he owns the flour mills, the tomato farms, and the cow that makes the cheese. Their journeys reflect two different answers to an ancient question. Philosophers have long debated the nature of the good life, contrasting the vita activa, a life of active engagement and work, with the vita contemplativa, a life of reflection and peace. Dangote is the living embodiment of the vita activa, his life a testament to perpetual work and building. Otedola's journey shows a dramatic transition from the active life to a more contemplative one, where the prize for winning the game is the freedom to finally put the controller down. They each pursued a different telos, an ultimate purpose. For Dangote, the telos is the perpetual growth and endurance of his industrial legacy. For Otedola, it evolved into the pursuit of personal peace and freedom from complexity. Otedola's life is a Hollywood movie, a dramatic thriller with a comeback ending. Dangote's life is an epic, multi-season documentary series that is still in production. Both are compelling, but one has a lot more explosions. Yet for all their differences, they share a common foundation, a colossal ambition, an obsessive work ethic, a deep and intuitive understanding of their environment, and an unshakable belief in their own vision. In the end, their two lives offer no single blueprint for making it big. Instead, they offer two different, equally valid, and equally powerful masterclasses in ambition, resilience, and the search for purpose. They show us that the path to the summit is not singular, that a mountain can be climbed from many sides. One man reached it with the agility of a fox, the other with the singular focus of a hedgehog. And so, our story of these two titans comes to a gentle close. We have walked two different paths tonight, one a twisting, volatile road of dramatic peaks and valleys, the other a long, straight, and steady climb. Both journeys, for all their differences, were fueled by a deep and abiding belief in the power of a single vision. Let the stories fade now, like the last embers of a fire. Their lessons are not about choosing one path over the other, but about understanding that your own journey is unique. The rise and fall of their stories can become like the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, a steady rhythm guiding you towards sleep. There is no single map for the mountains you have to climb. There is only your own journey, your own resilience, and your own search for peace. And for now, that journey can wait until morning. For now, there is only rest, deep, peaceful, and well-earned rest.